Good evening, everybody. Stephanie Brown here from Intelligent Construction Opportunities, here with some of the gang from Penta Technologies. We've got President Bill Wagner and Agile coach and all-around software developer, Brian Zybart. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Good evening, Stephanie. I'm well. How are you?
Very well, very well. And good evening to everybody who's joining us, anybody who's hopped on. We welcome all your interest and questions and comments this evening. So by all means, let us know where you're coming in from and what we can do to help answer any questions. As you are probably aware, the topic for tonight is the evolution of construction tech. I myself have a company called Intelligent Construction Opportunities, as you may be aware. And what I do is I help companies and contractors and people in construction evaluate technology. And one of the reasons I started this company was because I identified a gap between a lot of technology that's created for contractors, both in the field and back office, that are not often aligned enough with the technology that is handed to them that actually has to be integrated with the work being done in construction. So that's a little bit about me. As far as Bill and Brian are concerned, Bill, if you can introduce yourself. I know you've been a president at Penta now for about 4 years.
Yes.
And you've helped them pivot a bit to where they are now. So
yeah,
let the audience know what that's all about.
Yeah, I've been on like a 35-year round trip with the construction industry. I actually worked in the construction industry when I was a much younger person. When I was in high school and college, I worked for my uncle's general contracting business. And then I went away, got my journalism degree, did a whole bunch of stuff in marketing. And almost 5 years ago now, I took the opportunity to work at Penta Technologies, which is a company that's been making software for the construction industry, if you can believe this, since 1968 on mainframe computers. Yeah, right. It's crazy. 5 years before I was born, they were cutting code, trying to help construction companies. The reason I came back to the industry, though, is having worked in a lot of different industries, some of which kind of touched construction, some of which didn't. I saw the opportunity in this industry, with people that are doing what you do, right? Helping construction companies figure out how to get more productive through the use of technology. And it's been a wild ride for the last 5 years. It's been really exciting. And I'm honored to talk to everybody tonight. And I'm really excited to talk about some of the more forward-looking aspects that I know you got on the agenda, Stephanie, where we can talk about, where is the next big opportunity for this industry? Because that's really where I spend most of my time as president at Penta.
Absolutely. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Patrick Mimo, who's a fellow Canadian here out in Vancouver. A little bit of a spoiler alert. Patrick and some of his buddies and people he works with will be on our next live stream coming up in May. So hi, Patrick, and thanks for tuning in tonight. And a big shout out to Steve Turner from Bring Back the Trades. He's joined us tonight. He leaves tomorrow for his ultra run in Arizona. So we want to wish him all the best of luck with that and can't wait to find out all the dirty details as he makes his way across 250 miles of God knows where in Arizona. So shout out to both of you. I appreciate you hopping on tonight. And so with that, I want to introduce Brian. Brian, I know you've been, I believe, with Penta for about 10 years. Is that right?
Yep. So I've been with Penta for about 10 years. I actually started as an intern, worked my way through developer, Scrum Master, Agile coach. A lot of what I'm focused on now is getting the teams to build the right solutions in a timely manner So constantly thinking about how we can get the end user closer to the product as we're building it frequently. So we're building the right thing. That's a lot of what we're doing with our teams and focused on in the last 3 to 4 years, especially.
Yeah, and we'll want to dig a little deeper into that. So how is it you've been with Penta for 10 years now? How do you go about staying aligned with what you're designing for and really put yourself in the shoes of who you hope to be your end user?
A lot of it is trying to get as many people, collaborating with the team as possible. I mean, we go out into the field. We've gone and visited customers, potential customers. We've watched people use our software in the field. It's constantly getting as much feedback as possible at any moment possible. It's tough sometimes because, people in this industry are constantly busy and hard to find time for us to come and visit and get that feedback. But that's, any chance we can, that's what we're doing.
So when you say visit, what can you sort of like, give us a really good example of what does a visit mean? What does it entail for you, particularly knowing that you're using Scrum and Agile,
Sure,
to build your application?
Sure. So we have a mobile time clock that we've been building the last couple of years, and one of our customers had it out in the field. We went out on a field trip, watched their people clocking in and out with our clock, actually. And like, for example, we notice people are lining up, taking, an extra 5, 10, 15 minutes with, 30 people lined up to get through our system. That's a no-go if people are waiting to clock in. So what improvements can we make to make that system faster, to make it, less painful for the people using our products in the field, getting in there, observing and talking to the people using the product on the job site.
And how open are they when you go out to the site and you actually say, okay, yeah, I'm on the tech side of things. I'm trying to make your job easier in some way, shape, or form. How open are they to sharing information and, really giving you some, concrete stuff, pardon the pun, I guess, to
Sure.
go back to the office and actually apply?
It's a little all over the place. I mean, some people are going to be, more receptive to that feedback. Some people just want to get on with their day and get on with the job. So it's a little all over the place.
Stephanie, one of the things that I found that I find kind of interesting is, in my experience doing this, we seem to have an easier time having a conversation of that nature with people in the field as opposed to the people that work in the office. I think that the people in the office sometimes don't give the people in the field the appropriate amount of credit, right? Because, I work in an office, I wear dress shoes to work, I sit in front of a computer all day. I know technology better than those guys that are in the hole in the dirt trying to weld rebar together or timber frame buildings all day. We got to realize that the people that are out in the field for most construction companies are swimming in technology. It might not be a desktop computer with two 27-inch monitors, but even nowadays, like cordless drills have computer chips inside of them. And so when we get out in the field and we get an opportunity to talk to people, if we can clearly establish that we're there to help and that we get it, like we understand just how hard it is to get the work done in a construction setting with all the variables and all of the crazy unplanned things that happen throughout the course of a typical day on a job site, we typically get really good engagement and have really productive conversations with the people in the field. And the office folks traditionally and usually are the tougher audience to have that conversation with.
So, and that's a really good segue. So what I want to do with the audience tonight is I want to, put a few questions out there and see in the metaverse, so to speak, what people are thinking. So the first one is, what percentages of the features that you use in your apps are you actually using? Is that 30%, 60%, or higher? If anybody, who's on the call tonight wants to weigh in on that and share that information, that'd be really helpful. Because again, we have I think in a lot of cases, reasons to have general and good rapport, but it's all in the details. Yeah. So anybody who wants to weigh in on what that really looks like to Bill's point, I mean, you're all using technology in some way, shape, or form, even if it's rudimentary, which quite frankly, and thank you for that, Bill. To your point, it's not rudimentary anymore. Right. Everybody has a certain level of complexity. And, we just have to stop thinking that the trades and people on site are somehow not understanding technology. It's nothing less than an insult. That's what it is, at least from my perspective. And I want to welcome Buddy Brumley, joining us from Dallas. Hi, Buddy. Good to see you. Really glad that you come on and you support and you want to, hear what we're talking about tonight. And I think that's as good a segue as any for, just sort of framing out what we want to sort of talk about. So we want to sort of touch on, software solutions. So we all know, project management software is, with Procore and Autodesk and BIM 360 and so on. Those are I would say the top level. There's not really any construction company except for an ultra small contractor who isn't using some kind of project management at this point in time. So I kind of want to swing that around to Brian's background, which is, how does Scrum inform how Penta develops the features in your applications?
I think it gets down to what's in your ticker right now. How much of the app are you using, right? And so a lot of what we're constantly doing is deciding what not to build. That's really kind of what is at the center of agile software development. And so back to, what are the users asking for? What are the problems we're solving? It's really easy to sit in an office and think of a bunch of solutions that are interesting to me or that I think are the right thing to build. But we have to keep focusing that question towards what's the actual problem we're solving and getting that feedback from the users. That's how it's informed, really. So in Scrum, it's just a framework for developing software. We're constantly doing iterations, 2-week iterations around what we're building. And so it's really minimizing the amount of time we go before we start getting feedback from end users, from people in our business, whoever we can get that feedback from. It's minimizing the amount of time that we're kind of in a hole developing something before we come back to that.
And how do you know you're asking the right questions, Brian? I mean, obviously you've been doing this for a while, so I'll assume over time you get better at your questions. But when you take other people that, don't have that same experience, how would you recommend they start to jump off and make sure they're asking the right questions to get the right answers?
It's really hard, but getting rid of all your assumptions and asking, from the most generic point of view right away, as soon as possible, fielding as many points of view as you can is really important. We've gone down the path accidentally of taking one person's opinion as fact, for something that we need to build. And so making sure we're talking to more than just one user, more than one customer in terms of what they're seeing the problem is or what they think the solution might be. Because you don't want to go down building something that ends up being good for only one person.
For sure. And do you find that the trades, any particular part of the trades, are more receptive and things that they may not want as much, quote unquote, tech interfering with the core thing that they do in their job?
I'll throw that over to Bill because I don't know. I've seen much bias on my side.
Yeah, I mean, so Stephanie, where we tend to focus most of our energy is in the specialty trades, and it's an interesting subset of the market to focus on because the way I describe it, value chain in construction is really complicated and really long. Starts on one end with the person that owns the property, and it ends up with the specialty contractor that's all the way on the end of the subcontracting chain. And what we find is that specialty contracting space, that's where all the work happens, right? That's where things get built. That's where things get serviced And we like it because it's arguably the most challenging part of the value chain to develop software for, but it's also the part of the value chain that I think the vast majority of software companies don't quite understand the way they should. And the thing that we talk a lot, almost obsessively about at our company, is this concept of the job to be done by somebody. And so, the way to explain it to people who don't work in software, what are you hiring a piece of software to do? The same way you would hire your next person to work on your team. What are you hiring this piece of software to do? It's probably to solve some type of operational issue you have, or problem, or challenge. And so when we set out to design a piece of software, it starts with saying, okay, we're focused on specialty subcontractors. We calibrate where they are in the value chain, what they're dealing with every day, which, as we already covered, is a million things. A lot of plate spinning if you're a specialty subcontractor. Okay, let's figure out what part of their punch list isn't being met with a great technological solution. Do we think we have an idea where we could solve that problem for somebody better, faster, cheaper, easier? And once we do that, we have that kind of germ of an idea. That's where we do all the stuff that Brian talked about. We go out and we talk to people. We show them prototypes of what it would look like. We talk through the problem. We make sure we're not missing anything. Because I find a lot of times in technology in particular, we can be really good at coming up with solutions in search of a problem, right? And so what we obsess about is, let's make sure we get real clear about the problem first and who we're going to help solve it. And only after we're all clear on that, and we've talked to a whole bunch of people that experience that problem about how we think we can solve it, will we start designing a piece of software or a digital solution for that problem.
So can you give us an example of a scenario of that kind of a conversation? Like, what role on the job would you be talking to? Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I know is for sure, so important to the trades is, first of all, they've got to trust the app. Yeah. And second of all, that app's got to take as little interference as absolutely possible with what they already do. They're already...
I'll talk about somebody else's
software.
All right. So like we said, we were going to be unfiltered here, and I'm not going to say anything mean. I think if they hear this, they'll be happy to hear this. So 3 years ago, I was thinking about an integration between our accounting software and Procore.
Yep.
And I had a bunch of customers pounding tables. I can't believe that your accounting software isn't integrated with Procore. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. I want to learn more about how that would help you. And so I started flying around the country and sitting and talking to directors of operations, people who worked in estimating and pre-construction, and people who worked as kind of like your senior project manager, project cost controls people. And I started talking through like, okay, show me how you use Procore every day, right? Like, let's start there. Let me experience what you experience every day. I had a project manager at one of our customers tell me, Bill, you will get the iPad that has Procore on it out of my cold, dead hands. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, you obviously love this piece of software. Why do you love it so much? Had nothing to do with any of the project financial stuff. The job to be done that Procore was solving for that particular human being was he was the guy who had to deal with all the rolled up blue line prints of all the blueprints with all the markups on them. And by moving all that stuff to a digital form on an iPad in Procore, everybody on all of his jobs had the most up-to-date drawings with the most up-to-date notes at the push of a button. And so, here I am trying to figure out ways to connect up my accounting system with Procore. And I talked to a half dozen of these project manager, project cost controls, pre-construction people. And really what Procore was amazing at for that particular group of people had nothing to do with accounting. I wasn't going to be able to develop any software that would help them. But the thing they really loved about it was getting rid of all the paper that was consistently out of joint as it related to what was the latest revision of any given piece of paper. It's totally eye-opening to me. And I ended up in a completely different place than where I expected I was going to be when I bought all those plane tickets.
But again, because it comes down to practical convenience, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you eliminated all their paper all over the place and not being aligned and not being able to, as you just said, up to date. What was the last revision? What was the last change order? Who knows about the last change order? Oh, everybody that needs to know, imagine that. You know,
and people who don't live it, like, it's so easy to just gloss over something like that. Well, it feels super simple. We live in a world where all of our Microsoft Office documents are in SharePoint, and we're all always working off the latest revision. Just like, yeah, but on a construction job site 10 years ago, like, that was not the case, right? So yeah, that was a really interesting one, and hopefully that answers your question with a somewhat visceral example.
It's not about, Brian, do you have an example of something like that?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about, in one of the parts of our Struxy software, when we have the ability to track production, something that was interesting that came out of the end user was, how do you think about tracking that production? And are you thinking about that from a crew member or a cost code perspective? And so we ended up in a spot where we're developing two different ways to do basically the same thing. And we still ended up in a spot where we talk to foremen and they think about their cost codes first before anything, and when they're tracking time in production. And then we talk to some foremen and they're thinking about their crew members first in terms of time in production. And so that was a case where we thought maybe we would end up in one spot or the other in terms of a solution. And we've kind of stuck in with both options, both being utilized to this day. That was an example that I was thinking about in terms of bringing that feedback directly from the user and getting that directly into our software for the solution itself.
Well, and generally speaking, I mean, I think that all software, let alone construction software, is all built from a perspective. It's all the perspective of a particular selection of users. Mm-hmm. And that's why I do think you see so much overlap in construction in particular, because there isn't yet the refinement of somebody really understanding the depth and the breadth, for example, of the detail of, say, mechanical versus, somebody doing electrical. And it's not even mechanical versus electrical. It's mechanical versus electrical in that particular type of project. Are you doing house restorations versus commercial buildings versus, road work? I mean, the nuances in all of it are, I think, the biggest challenge for construction developers of software to me, be more formalized in how they make these communications, that it isn't just enough to go out and do site visits alone or fly around or whatever. You actually have to have boots on the ground that are literally part of the Gemba walks, that are really understanding how many movements and motions does it take you to do X kind of task. Because then you can take your app away and your code is going to match that workflow. And I think, that may sound nirvana, and certainly there's applications that have achieved that. I mean, but they are few and far between. But I think that the more focused an application is designed for a specific perspective of users, the better that app is going to be at evolving itself over time, as opposed to what we see. And Bill and I, we've had this discussion. I mean, there's so much overlap, because just the idea of, I mean, not to downplay what you said about Procore and digitizing all the papers, but now I think we have to get more specific.
Yeah.
And
we were talking about beer before we jumped on the live stream.
Yeah.
And like, as you're talking, I'm thinking of the beer industry, right? Hopefully a lot of people on the live stream like beer. So if you think about it, right, back before there was refrigerated transport for mass produced yellow beer, which I don't particularly like. Some people love it. Great. Back then, there were tens of thousands of breweries all over the country, and they were creating products that were tightly tailored to the specific needs of the people in their local area, right? I could ride my bicycle if it was 100 years ago. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I could have rode my bicycle to probably 50 different breweries. But then when beer started to become mass produced, somehow we all got comfortable being okay with Miller Lite and Budweiser, or if you're up north, right, maybe Labatt or Molson's, right? Now, though, what we found is that the industry has caught up to the needs of the consumer. And guess what? There's a whole nother explosion of craft beer around the world. And it's back to the way it was 100 years ago, where my very specific palate, the things that I like in a beer, there's at least a dozen places that I could go to in Milwaukee where I could get that need satisfied. And that wasn't the case 20 years ago when everybody was involved in this massive compromise. And I think, to your point, Stephanie, the construction industry, it kind of feels like we were pretty happy with kind of the general Swiss Army knife toolkit that was being provided by technology vendors for a good long while, because it's progress, right? The beer's fresh, it's cold, it's cheap, it's pervasive, it's everywhere. I could get it. But I think the same way beer drinkers were kind of unsatisfied, right? I feel like the construction industry is starting to realize that some of those generalized solutions are unsatisfying for your specific needs. And it's really difficult to deploy a generalized solution that meets the specific needs of everybody.
Yeah. But I do think, again, this started with software developers not having had, and it's in fairness to, like, even think of what kind of education does a software developer have to have, right? And what certain kind of age group would they fall into? So therefore, if they went to school for computer science and that's what they became really good at, how would they ever know what it was to be a mechanical engineer or a mechanical installer or an electrician or a plumber, or on and on and on and on and on? That's not their experience. So to your point, I think that's a wonderful analogy about the beer. Now we have to really get specific about what we're solving for, and not just say, we're bringing in stakeholders for the sake of bringing in stakeholders so everybody can hopefully adopt this thing. You have to really go out there and dig for the use case. Because as you said earlier, both of you have identified it tonight. Mm-hmm. You can't just go out there. You have to have them show you you're not going to fix what's not broken.
Right.
What's broken?
Yeah.
That's the challenge. But then find what is specifically broken. Mm-hmm. And then, you've got yourself a concern. I mean, there certainly are, there's softwares out there, that have, cameras and whatnot on cranes. I mean, they are doing a very specific thing. Yeah. I mean, even drones are going to have to be specific in what they do and how they do it to be competitive in their sector as a technology, but also obviously in what they're doing to be able to improve construction. And, having Steve on the call tonight from Bring Back the Trades, I mean, that's a perfect segue. I think that, technology has all kinds of opportunity to help to shore up this labor deficit. I would be very shocked if we are actually going to be able to, cure it with manpower alone.
Well, that's clearly not going to happen, right? I mean, you think about all the choices that present themselves to a 19-year-old, and it's tough to attract enough of them into the trades. But even if we could, even if our win rate was like 3 out of every 4 19-year-olds that we really wanted to entice to join this industry, if we got them, it's probably still not enough people, right? Like the demographics are not favorable. We got a massive wave of people that are about to age out of this industry, and all that institutional experience is going to walk right out the door along with those people. And I don't know how we're going to solve for it without getting good at technology, at least at some baseline level.
Well, exactly. But I do also think that there's a bridge to be made for the new demographic coming into the potential of construction, using tech as the lever. Yeah. And that's where I think part of the bridge comes from. I know that, we've got people on the call right now that, in three different perspectives alone for particular people that I'm aware of or have joined us this evening. I mean, Buddy fits to me into a perfect realm of a mentor, somebody that understands some of tech, uses tech, and yet has all that raw experience that you cannot replace with any kind of technology, because it needed, technology, quite frankly, was developed out of the needs and the brains and of the skills that somebody like a Buddy already has.
Right.
And then you've got Steve, who's representing more of the scholarships for the trade schools, right? And so that you're trying to foster that. But then again, the trade schools have to start showing themselves, and as far as I'm concerned, bridging gaps with companies like Penta, so that you're helping those trade schools to bring along the technology with the actual skills that they're learning.
Absolutely.
So that I just think, it's all of those dimensions. And so if I can, just sort of indulge a little bit here in a little bit of a map that I bought up, and I've covered everybody's face for the minute, but just bear with me. I mean, these are all the different kinds of ways that you can see, how big and how broad technology can be. And we've got a lot of work to do. That's all I can say. We've got a lot of work to do. And I think that these kinds of conversations are valuable, because it gives everybody the opportunity to have a voice. And, as I've shared with both of you, I mean, the intention for this particular live stream, the Tech Before the Tech, is to be able to take out as much dirt from under the out of the carpet or under the carpet as we can, and just level set. Where are we? What can we do? What can't we do? What's available? What's not available? And what won't change? And just be realistic about it all. One of the things that, one of my buddies, Jesse Hernandez, talks about clicks. It's like, he says to me, man, if there's more than 4 clicks, I'm not using it. And that's important.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely,
that's their core job, is not there to collect data on behalf of the GC. They have enough on their head trying to follow the schedule and, getting that sheetrock put up in X amount of time for whatever they're doing in the moment. And anyway, so I think all of this is tremendously valid. I mean, as I said, I started out with a little bit of framework tonight, but I mean, there's, we can go down the usual roads, but I think this portends, an extended conversation, with yourselves and others, to actually start to rip apart, where are the dynamics? Where are we right now with the labor deficits and the environmental challenges and even the supply chain, which I think it'll be years before we get back to anything considered normal. And yet, as we all know, the world keeps changing every day, between, the war in Ukraine and the threats coming from those areas, and on and on and on. I mean, I don't think anybody can create applications anymore in isolation of these factors. No. And just, hope that, I hope the sales guys meet their quotas this month, because here come new features. We have a new release.
Yeah. Well, you know, Stephanie, I think, you know, seeing as how Brian and I are from the tech side of things, and we got a bunch of people from the construction industry on the live stream, I think what I would say from our perspective, help us help you. And the way you can do that is let's get to that real conversation, right? Let's talk about the Gemba, right? The real place where the work is happening. Let's talk about what you're on the hook in terms of performance with your boss for, right? And hold us accountable for helping, because if we can't help, we have no business selling you anything, and we should stop wasting your time in a conversation. And so I think, you know, this dance that technology companies and construction companies end up doing for the vast majority of recent history, the way both sides have been choosing to engage in that dialogue has not been overwhelmingly productive. No. I think, you know, from the technology perspective, what I want to know is, what are you trying to do with your business? What are you trying to do with the people that work in your business? And what are your biggest challenges that you're trying to tackle and cross off the punch list this year? If there's something that I could do that can help you with some of the things that we've developed, or some of the things that we're about to develop, or some of the things we're thinking about developing, you just gave me an opportunity to engage in a dialogue. And if I don't have anything for you, well, there's 7 million companies in the construction industry in North America that I could go talk to instead of you. Right. So like, let's just get to the real conversation as quickly as possible. And I think that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to help people cut through all the BS and get down to like, what is the real problem we're trying to solve for here? And then how can I start plugging in some potential variables that end up putting good stuff on the other side of the equal sign in that math equation, right?
And that's exactly right. And I, you know, when you and I met each other, I mean, that was the meeting of the minds. I mean, I saw somebody that was, I guess we've lost you. Anyway,
he'll hop back on.
You know,
sure.
I'm sure. Welcome to technology, everybody. Welcome to technology. So anyway, Brian, so, you know, sort of, you know, here he is. There he is. And here's Bill.
Give him a second. He'll be back.
Yeah, you just had to demonstrate a little bit of technology.
That's right.
It's like, well, you don't like it? Well, we could just make it all go away.
Right. With one button.
And then if we want, we'll bring it all back again. Yeah, so for sure. So, you know, I would like to for sure continue the conversation. And next time, bring in, you know, tradespeople to have this conversation with you. And you're right, to start to break down the barriers. But I also think it's just as valid and important that, you know, we start to go up and down the value chain so that I hate to say it, but the silos that technology is built in start to be broken down so that, you know, you know that, you know, the last guy on or the so-called bottom of the value chain is the most important. They are the builders. Absolutely. There's nothing we have around us without the physical builders. And to me, if you start there and start to then weave in the other pieces of the value chain, then you're designing technology and making technology for a bigger reason and a more specific reason. Because I love the beer analogy. I think it's bang on, right? I mean, we can keep making the same apps, do the same sort of things, and, you know, hope that your competitor is doing something a little less than you are, and hope, you know, cross your fingers. But it's no way to design, because, well, for me, I tend to be a philosophical person in my heart, and I think that we're not talking about a construction industry. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about the very things that make everyone's life go round in a society where we're fortunate to not, you know, be dodging bombs tonight and what have you, and, you know, have sewers and have toilets and have all the basics and all of this stuff is attached to. And that's why it's passion for me to have the tech before the tech and to bring these pieces together. And I just want to give a quick shout out to David McCullough, my friend down in Atlanta from Trade Talks USA, joining us tonight on the call. Again, just like Bring Back the Trades has a mission along with Home Depot to, help to bring back the trades. But again, I think it's not just the trades. It's not just the people. It's how are we doing things in 2022 that then applies to the available people that are truly interested and are wanting to enter into the fields. And how do you then take the people that are exiting the industry and still leverage their experience and all the value that they're going to leave behind when they walk out of those gates for the last time. And, to me, that's all part of the ecosystem. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for taking your time and making this a really, in my opinion, a very good first launch of the tech before the tech, and having lots to say. And I certainly want to continue the conversation with both of you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was an honor to be invited.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And is there anything that either of you want to add before we close up shop, or for tonight? Or
I think we're good.
I'll take that as crickets, and we're good. We're good to go.
Yes.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank everybody in the audience for jumping on the call, taking your valuable time tonight. And we're always open and will be open to have more questions and more pertinent questions answered on your behalf, and take any of the comments that anybody has. Bring them on, because, as I said, we're here to sweep the dirt out from under the rug, and that includes anybody wanting to listen. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night.